to take a multi-perspective view, you got to be pulled out of what you thought was some kind of given or certain or absolute perspective. But that immediately throws you into uncertainty, which in general the ego mind doesn't like.
Yeah.
So the embracing, allowing of uncertainty is a necessary step, but the ego mind really resists that. But you hear people talk about it as people get older. You hear people say, man, I used to think I knew a lot of stuff, and over time I just become aware that I know less and less.
Yeah.
There's like that. There's that awakening to like, wow, this whole thing is infinitely more complex than I once thought.
Right.
I'm still wanting to list these paradigm shifts,
Yeah. Paradigm shift is a point of entry that we've been talking about, that like they can be pretty personal, and they're usually related to like an individual's experience more than a theoretical framework.
Oh, you mean that term paradigm shift?
Just what the paradigm shift is for a person, because it's there are some like you've laid out as far as tensegrity, but then there's also, when it comes to consciousness, there's personal paradigm shifts about what the meaning of a personal event is. Like, personally speaking, you can know something conceptually until you like feel it emotionally and consciously. It's not going to be true, but that is a type of paradigm shift where you have a theoretical understanding, but it becomes true in a way that it wasn't before.
Right. Yeah, because with a lot of them, I think in alignment with what you're saying, a person will conceptually, they'll profess a certain paradigm, but behaviorally, that's not what they do. Or right. Emotionally, that's not how they feel.
Right.
Which is definitely an important thing. But there's a long list of the objective paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
That I think a lot of people just don't even know.
Right. What is the effect of a paradigm shift?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, because obviously it varies.
I mean, it's a loaded question. The answer is consciousness, but it's like a light. It's like something's illuminated that wasn't.
Any dimension has its content, and the question within any dimension is, what is self in relation to that dimension? And the nature of the human psyche, as I understand it, we make these massive errors and distortions with regard to what is self in relation to it. So, for example, you can watch a movie and you can be in this state as though you were one of the characters in the story. And then you literally have this experience of joy or of terror or of sadness, even though the truth is you're not that character. Meaning you're not that character in 3D reality, right? So when you're watching the movie Jaws, you're not really in danger of being eaten by a shark right now. Physically, you're not in danger, but psychically, you obviously are. Which is what makes all this stuff so damn confusing. Because we can psychically experience all this stuff as though all these things, and we can put our sense of self here or there and have extremely intense experiences. And of course it comes back to, well, what's real? What's true? What is self? Where should I or should I not project my sense of self? Right?
Right.
I mean, because you could make an argument that, well, if you never did that at all, you wouldn't, there'd be no adventure, there'd be no fun, right? You just say, right. Well, that's just a movie, and you'd go to a football nihilism. Game, and well, that's just yeah, right. You'd end up at nihilism, or at least existential nothingness.
Yeah, I guess nihilism is still a little more proactive than existential nothingness.
Right. But that's the game, right? This whole game is like, wait a minute, what is actually real? What is self? What are the dynamics here with regard to why you're experiencing this or that. You know, what are you so upset about right now? What are you in such turmoil about? Or on the positive end, it's like, what is it that you're thinking you're so badass in relation to right now?
Right.
You know?
Right. It's just like you're talking about it and talking about just the dragon child cave analogy and like the content within each of those caves, and that you can identify with any part of that at a given moment.
Yes.
And that one of those parts is still just a part.
Yes.
Of that part. Right? So like this burrowing down into, and it's like finding that one instance where you can see all of that at once is so like transformative.
Yeah. And
then it begins to open up and unravel and spiral out from there as far as an awareness of the 3-in-1 aspect of that and the 1-in-3 in a given experience. It begins to open that possibility up in other circumstances and under different conditions in other contexts.
Wow, that was really well said.
So maybe that's what I'm kind of pointing to with the personal paradigm shift, is that dynamic.
Yes. Which I think technically I would tend to not use the word paradigm for that kind of shift.
Yeah, I thought that was a fair thing to point out, that like that might not be the right word for it, but that's what I see is like the more you're exposed to this information, the more you're exposed to this possibility for understanding, the more likely you'll begin to be able to apply it to something in your own life.
Yeah.
But like I could tell someone all day about my life, unless they're able to see their context and mine, it's going to be tough for that to like really land on some level, or at least on the level we're talking about, where it begins to reshape how they understand self. And that's what like the dimension approach is, you bringing conscious attention to that dynamic in someone.
Yes.
It takes that often for it to happen. So you're doing it intentionally in a space or in a container. I'll just say in a space.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing that intentionally in a way that someone either comes to out of necessity, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of a desire for a shift in performance or in just functioning. All of that is possible for someone to go through on their own. Then it's just kind of, it's grace, right? It's like whenever it happens. But the offering of the approach is to try to create space to facilitate that.
Yeah, and if you use those words, the ego mind's, the way I understand it and experience it, the ego mind's primary tool to not let it happen is to close down space, right? Because when there's space, when there's conscious space, then there's this thing that happens.
Yeah.
That's the natural order of things, right? It's what occurs. So to prevent the awakening, to prevent the healing, to prevent the development, you can close down space. And that halts the healing, halts the development, prevents the awakening, and freezes experience in time, and not only inhibits what the activity is that was going to occur in that dimension, but like you're saying, it now disables that particular psyche in its functionality in the world. But to go in and to start to open up a space that had been closed down, when you start to open it up, it's like, even if it's 100 years later, it's like, well, here's that energy, here's that trauma, here's that experience that the person had closed down and put a lid on, which makes it so difficult.
And it's we all do that. I think that's what's so important, like that is a healthy reaction to being overwhelmed. Yeah, right. As like developmentally.
Yeah, because when you fail to do that, then you have psychotic break. You have insanity.
Right.
So it's a way of protecting the mind in the same way that when you get hit in the head, your energy system seizes up to prevent the shockwave from moving through the brain in an attempt to protect the brain from what would have been damaging shockwaves.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it can only do that to a degree. If you get hit hard enough, it doesn't work, right? But the reason there was that lockup was because it was going to be too much. The same reason you close your eyes when the light's too bright. It's because when the light's too bright, you're literally trying to protect your eyes from being damaged. It can just be uncomfortable, but if the light's bright enough to where it was going to damage your eyes, you closing your eyes is the healthy, appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
And closing your mind down when your mind was going to be threatened, the sanity of your mind, like you said, it is the right thing to have done.
Yeah.
It's just that now you need to undo it. Seeing it that way, I think, like you're pointing out, I mean, it sort of speaks to takes the ego out of the bad guy role a little bit. You know, that the ego is just trying to protect the system.
Yeah.
It's just that it's reactive and unconscious and limited in its scope, and that there is a bigger world out there than the ego knows how to deal with.
I was thinking about something the other day, just the rhyme in my head. I'm still trying to understand. Like, there's nothing new, just you. Part of it is someone will tell you something and you're like, yeah, me too. Like there's aspects of experience that are shared, but there's also the personal context of what a person's going through is what they have to work with when it comes to beginning to understand these things.
Yes. And I mean, that brings up the topic of transpersonal awareness, transpersonal consciousness, and that to allow, I mean, this is one of the biggest shifts, I think, with clients. I'll try to, help frame and illuminate the game that they're caught in, whatever particular game of life they're struggling with. And then often it's like, and what needs to happen right there is you have to lose that game in order for healing, in order for resolve, and it's like that they're stuck in a perspective where losing the game doesn't even seem like that wasn't even
on the menu.
Yeah, it wasn't on the menu at all. And that's how our ego perception works, is we get stuck where we think we're looking from ground zero out at the world, and to have the very place we're looking from be the ground that needs to give way is quite threatening. But of course, that's where all the death, surrender, allow, accept, sacrifice concepts come into it.
But then the balance of that, when that starts to happen, that's not new. It's a timeless cycle. It's something we all have to go through. The history of everyone has been through it.
Right.
It's not, because I think that one thing that can lead to, if you start to experience something like that, is mania. And mania is latching on to the individuality of it.
Right.
And not remaining grounded in the transpersonal nature of it.
Right.
And that continues to be hard for me, that it takes effort to remain grounded in a way and not swept away by the seeming uniqueness of the experience or insight.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I mean, just then I was like speaking really sternly, but I was like talking to myself. And then I was thinking about how people sometimes say that you seem caustic or abrasive. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if like part of you is talking to part of yourself that doesn't want to hear it, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly is that at times, I'm sure. There's also that I'm doing that conscious holding, and then I'm starting to empathically embody the angry resistance in the other person's psyche. Mm-hmm. But my holding that charge actually, this comes back to the black nightgown stuff and the projection and all this. It's so confusing. And obviously this is going down a little rabbit hole, but just that idea of, if I'm trying to tell you a truth, and let's say that it's accurate, right? Like I'm trying to tell you, Jeff, it's over. He's dead. right? And you're like not, your psyche is fending off accepting that. Because in your psyche, accepting that he's dead is not an option. You're just in the absolute fight mode to prevent him from dying, right? Whoever he is. So you're caught in a state, right? And let's say I can see that. And so then if I'm going to try to help you out of that state, what can I do? And of course, there's various options and various things. But one of the things would be the angry fight response, which would be the dragon, if we're going to use the cave thing. It's like, well, if I empathically hold and embody the dragon, then it takes that load off of you in the moment to where you can then perhaps shift to the child. Feel the fear, the grief, the helplessness that he's dead. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're caught on an electric fence. Your hands just stuck in an intense contraction because the electricity is pumping through you. And it's like, how do I get you off that electric fence? And it's like, well, I got to grab you. But when I do, now that charge is running through me. So I'm going to intensify. I'm going to contract. I'm going to, if we use the fight response thing, it's like suddenly I seem like I'm enraged, right? And technically I am. But I'm just holding it. And while I'm doing that, I'm trying to yank you off the fence because perhaps I'm able to stay more conscious than you were in that moment with that charge. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm not just grabbing you and now we're both just sitting there getting electrocuted, right? It's like, am I able to ground? Because that's what it comes to, right? If you grab an electric fence, if you can ground it, well, you can just let it run through you and it's fine. And then you can actually let go of the fence. But if you can't ground, then the charge just keeps doing a feedback loop.
Yeah.
With your body and back to the fence.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if I can come in and stay grounded and grab you, I can let the charge run through me and I can get you off the fence. But in that interim period, I'm going to look like I'm the cause of the whole problem to begin with,
Right. And then I'll probably forget about the fence later.
Yeah, right. There would just be that time that Lance abused you.
Right.
Out of nowhere came up and just grabbed you and
tried to electrocute me?
Right.
It's the weirdest damn thing.
It's funny, but it's not that far off, from what
right
in certain situations happens. And of course the reverse can happen where if you were angry, it just can vary. It's like if because a person can go into the child and have the same effect happen. If you're stuck in the child and you're just collapsed and helpless and can't seem to, mobilize any aggression, any power, any ability to function. And if I go into an empathic merge and hold that and resonate that, it can have the effect of freeing you up to shift to the dragon.
Mm.
And of course, the ultimate shift you want is to be neither the dragon nor the child, but to be the consciousness.
Obviously.
Yeah. And allow that they're both valid experiences.
Right.
Because it's both.
Right.
You feel angry as hell and you feel scared and powerless at the same time.
And that's the shift I was talking about as far as being able to see that in relation to one experience or one context. Then you can see it in other ones too.
Yeah.
And that's the conscious shift. I think another thing I was thinking about while you're talking about that was when you're bringing that attention, we talk about being like an attention-seeking culture or looking for external validation and just the underlying neediness we all feel for this conscious attention.
Yeah.
To the things that we often don't even know about, but seek external validation for or seek external attention for. And that relationally we're not getting we're seeking that, but not often getting that conscious attention.
It's interesting. Actually, last night with a friend, we were just surfing YouTube and hanging out and watching some live Elvis videos, and then went and watched some old live ones. But she was making the comment that she'd never really done that, and watched a bunch of videos like that of Elvis, and she was making the comment.
You're like, this is every Monday night for me.
Right, exactly. and she just put it well. She said it was really sad. We watched a certain performance where he still like sang magnificently, but it was really near the end, before he died. And
was it the Vegas show or?
Yeah, it was one of the Vegas shows. Yeah. And she was saying that like when he was brand new and on the Ed Sullivan Show, and he was so connected to the audience, and there was this way that he didn't seem alone. He seemed really in this like relational
communing.
Yeah. And then she said in that last one, it was like you could see that he had gone deep inside somewhere. And in this particular video, he even looks a couple of times at the people around him and smiles, and a certain kind of relational dynamic happening. But you could just see that, okay, there's like layers of being sealed off that were there, that he seemed very, very alone.
Yeah.
Even as he's on stage being worshipped by the world, I
think it's that pre-Oedipal Oedipal shift.
It's a good question. I mean, my sense is it's more, I would say that yes, I would put it all in the category of that.
Yeah.
But that something went wrong. You know what I mean? There was a pathology, which something goes wrong for all of us in that shift, but something went very wrong. In general, I would say that, and it's this strange thing. It makes sense if you go back to Freud, as usual. But it's like a lot of really famous celebrities had this very intense merge relationship with mother, and a either non-existent or very problematic relationship with father. It was true of Sinatra. It was true of Elvis. It's true of Kanye West. I mean, you can just go down the list, and it seems to be. It's almost like a requirement for being a celebrity. And I think if I was going to explain it, I'd say this idealizing gaze that celebrity is about comes from the pre-Oedipal part of the psyche. So the person that is energetically still at a pre-Oedipal phase of development, the magic of that, the magical thinking of that, the idealization of that, the still being in a unindividuated state, it's like they're still open to a certain pre-Oedipal ground that leaves them accessible for the audience's pre-Oedipal longings. It's the same with like Marilyn Monroe. She just, it's like there's this certain kind of openness where there's access. It's the reason, and then, this gets into really dicey territory, but why is the virgin, why is the young girl, that part of the psyche, it's like, well, they haven't sealed off in the sealing off kind of maturing, individuating, creating boundaries thing. And that's a part of, what's so hard about maturing and growing is this, as we separate out, there's a loss at each level, right? There's a loss of the Garden of Eden, right? Is that it was the Garden of Eden, and now it's not. And when you see someone on whatever level that's still in the Garden of Eden, it seems like if I am friends with them, if I have sex with them, if I am a fan of theirs, then it's like via that we get some of that Garden of Eden experience. And it's a back to innocence, back to wholeness, back to this connection to something that feels lost to us. And it's extremely powerful because it's, again, if you use this dimension idea, it's opening your psyche to the dimension. So, the classic midlife crisis thing, and then suddenly the red convertible has this symbolic meaning, perhaps, in your psyche that puts you in touch with a dimension of your psyche that you haven't been in touch with, right? That you lost connection to. And then you're using the red convertible, or you're using the young girl, or you're using the music, that you used to listen to back then or whatever, as a vehicle, as a symbolic vehicle to access that dimension of your psyche. But we don't tend to think about it that way. Even though, Carl Jung very much tried to elucidate that all this stuff is symbolic to us and it impacts us in relation to our own psyches. But we tend to think it's really out there.
Yeah. Because we've lost it, so we got to go find it somewhere.
Yeah, and so last night, for the zillionth time, I'm watching Elvis on stage, and it's this powerful, magical experience. It's almost weird. It's like, okay, am I in love with Elvis Presley? Do I just really have a thing for Evel Knievel type jumpsuits? Do I, and
dude had a lot going for him. I mean,
yeah, right. He had the coolest hair of anyone ever. He had the,
totally.
Just in every category, he was the coolest, even when he just was wearing the most uncool outfit ever, he made it look the coolest. But you're having that experience and it's I want that, and it's I don't know if I want to know him. Do I want to marry him? Do I want to dress like him? Do I want to just listen to his music? It's there's something that you want.
Yeah, you want to incorporate it.
Yeah, you want to incorporate it. Yeah, well put. And you get a little taste of that
because he's on TV.
Because he's on TV and you're watching.
Yeah.
And there's some consciousness, there's some essence that is manifest that you're getting to experience, and because it brings to light this thing of it's in a certain way his light bulb is on. Or one of his light bulbs is on, and you become aware that light bulb in you is off. But watching him makes you start to a little bit find that light bulb in yourself.
Right. I think there's also the dynamics of personal talent, that there's that light bulb maybe you're able to realize that light bulb's on, or, that light bulb's illuminated, and then you still won't have the same talents as someone else, right?
True.
That there's still you're gonna have different skill sets, but there's a feeling when you notice that light bulb being off and starts to be switched on, where you begin to think, oh, I am that I that's me, and then you're oh, but I can't do that dance, I can't do
right.
There's
but I still go to karaoke and sing Sinatra songs all the time.
Yeah, well, it's fun.
Try to get just a momentary experience of that is me. I'm just as good.
I have no doubt. I'm talking about myself, Lance. I'm talking about myself when I watch Elvis dance, and I can't do it. But I'd love to.
I mean, now that you're working with this zero chakra, first chakra,
who knows? Who knows what kind of dancer is going to come out of that?
Right.
There's a way in which he's expressing himself that you want to emulate.
Yeah.
And what that gets translated through is your own body and your own talents. But there is something he's expressing that when you find that light, you can express it in your own way.
Totally. Because the creativity, the reason I phrase it, performance is consciousness at play.
That's what I was thinking about.
That was good. You brought that.
And we've been doing this for a little bit.
That was impressive. That was an hour and 45-minute long con to bring it right back to consciousness at play.
I'm telling you, it's getting easier. I don't know.
The consciousness, which we're saying comes through these different essence points, or can come through these different essence points. And so So the closer to pure expression via consciousness, distorted and mitigated by ego, the more beautiful, the more compelling, the more moving it is. Whereas, as we know, you can take the same singer, a singer can hit the same notes, and it can just sound flat or awful.
Yeah.
Like, for example, every time I sing Sinatra, I remember my daughter would always, I'd sing, and then I'd ask her, okay, to critique my singing, and it was kind of fun because she was
honest.
She was honest. That was the hard part. That was the part I didn't appreciate.
I'm surprised you asked, honestly.
Yeah. But I'd say, like, okay, does that sound, because I'd feel like I got better, and then I'd say, here, let me just sing, a few bars of, and then her constant thing was, she'd say, you are getting better and better at imitating Frank Sinatra. And she's like, but someday I'd love to hear Lance Hauge sing.
Love it. Love it.
But she was totally right. I'm still trying to find that.
Your voice.
Yeah, right.
I had an English teacher in high school who just always talked about voice. And like, it always, one of those things I would hear it and I'd be like, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful concept.
Right.
I don't know what it is yet,
Yeah.
And, but she, like, that was what she taught, was voice in writing. And, yeah, it's what your daughter was talking about too.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like you find it eventually. Sky's mom was a music teacher, and she would always say that every kid is a genius. That's how she worked with every kid. Mm-hmm. And I think that like every kid has a voice. Every kid has a way of expressing that's unique to them. Every kid has something that they're going to be great at.
Yeah.
And it's not every kid that gets the opportunity, the context, the environment, the chance to find out what that is. That it plays to this idea of consciousness too, that there is this consciousness expressed through this individual that's looking for its voice.
Yeah, and we all are moved by it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just when it's the real deal, it's the real deal. It's like light. You can try to pretend that the light bulb's on or make it look like the light bulb's on, but that's different than when a light bulb's on and it's illuminating. Like, it has an impact.
Mm-hmm. Thinking back to what we were talking about as far as separateness and relating, there's an initial separateness of this person singing with this talent and with this light that I feel I don't have. There's a merging, or it's like, I am that person, to the manic extent of delusionally thinking that person, you are singing through that person.
Right.
Because on some level you are, right? Like, that's the consciousness in all of us singing through that person.
Yeah.
And then the separateness again of seeing, or the leveled, tiered separateness of it, of seeing the separate self, seeing the other self singing, seeing that in yourself, and containing the fact that it's all one.
Yeah.
And like appreciating that the different expression of each in each of you.
Yeah. I like that.
It'll be one of those things I listen back to and I wonder who said it. If you want to learn more about the Dimension Approach, please visit dimensionapproach.com.